Inbound call handling. So this session is all about auto attendance call queues. I'm sure you guys have worked with it. This is really just kind of to reinforce some of the things I've seen over the year and some best practices around how we build it, how we take it from the design phase into actually building it, working with the business, because a lot of times these workflows are not necessarily decided by IT, but by the business. And that's where we sometimes have to deal with the business, which we don't always like. My name is Madsen. I'm a solutions architect at Cloud Revolution. I've got 10, 12 years experience deploying Microsoft UC. Lately, I just stepped into a pre-sales role, so I'm getting less and less technical. So let's use the tech stuff I have while I still have it before I start forgetting all about it. A shout out to our sponsors. I am sure you guys have seen this slide all day long. Landis, Need, Logitech, LG, HP Poly. And then I know we have a bunch of other sponsors out there. Go out and check them out. They've got a lot of cool stuff to show you guys. Agenda. We're going to start in Excel. It's funny, over the years, Excel has really become my number one tool in what I do day to day. And I'm not talking about numbers for sales. I'm talking about actually doing configuration and implementation. Most of what we're doing, we're documenting in Excel these days. We're also using Excel quite a bit within my organization to use concatenate functions, where we're actually generating PowerShell out of Excel so that we can be very consistent with our delivery. So Excel is one of the tools I use quite a bit. Also cut sheets and so on. Teams Admin Center. We will be messing around with Teams Admin Center today. When I do deploy large amounts of auto attendance, call queues, resource accounts, I tend to fall back on PowerShell to do a lot of these repetitive things. We're not going to have time here today to start digging into how we can optimize doing this stuff with PowerShell. Again, it comes back to doing a lot of stuff in Excel that would generate PowerShell and then fire the PowerShell. Today, we're just going to stick with the Teams Admin Center, and then at the end, we're going to do a little bit of Q&A. So that's basically all the slideware I have for today. So let's start digging into what I said first is Excel. So let's say oops, man. So in this case study here, we have a company called Dunder Mifflin Paper Company. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. In this scenario, they have an East Coast and a West Coast office. They're headquartered in New York. They have an East Coast office in Los Angeles. And then they have some guy named Dwight who's out in Las Vegas. But for all intents and purposes, we have corporate, which is New York. We have a sales organization on the East Coast. We have a sales organization on the West Coast. And then if time permits, we can also talk a little bit about what the IT help desk is looking like. So from an East Coast perspective, which is the main office, here is a worksheet I typically use that I just created, and it's basically all the different properties of an auto attendant. And I use this to document everything I'm doing before I actually start configuring my auto attendants, because this is something that I can take back to the business and I can talk to different business managers to go over this stuff. Also, as a consultant, sometimes we like to not spend a lot of time. We like to go in and work with the local IT department, and we want to enable that IT department to go out to the business and talk about stuff. I tend to be way more expensive than internal IT coming in as a hired gun. So being able to hand this over to IT and say, go out and talk to your business about how do we want to design these things, right? So when I'm designing these inbound workflows, I typically design from the top down, where I'm saying I'm going to start with that first auto attendant where the inbound calls are coming in. and then we're going to look at the different key mappings and where these key mappings going to take me. They're going to typically take me to a call queue. I'm not a big fan of assigning individuals to a key mapping because you could have turnover within the organization. I really like having a call queue, and then even if it's just a single person, assign that person as an agent to the call queue. So I frown upon directly assigning individuals to a key mapping. So typically, I typically do the design from the top down, but when we're building this stuff, we have to build it from the bottom up. But when you're building it from the bottom up and you don't have a top down design, it becomes sometimes a little bit problematic building it from the bottom up because you don't have the full vision in your mind at that point. So top down means that I've got some items here. We have just a name here. The name here doesn't really have any bearing on my configuration. It's just a name that East Coast Office main line. Then I need to define a resource account. I'm a stickler on naming convention, and there's different ways that people are doing naming. When it comes to teams, my naming convention typically is site-specific. Sometimes it's country-specific, sometimes it's time zone-specific. It really depends on what configuration item I'm dealing with. So typically with auto attendants and stuff, I do like to associate them with an office. In this case, this may be a national auto attendant, but it's really driven out of the HQ office. So US-New York-New York City 01. I like always having a serial number after my city name because oops, all of a sudden we grew and now we have a location next door. That's New York City 02, right? So always prepare yourself with your naming conventions that they need to be able to expand, right? So you're never just stuck. If it's a government entity, for example, the chances are that you are opening up branches outside of the US are slim. In those cases, I wouldn't prefix it with US if it's a city. If it's a city or a county, I may not even want to deal with having a state as part of my naming convention. But in this case here, Dunder Mifflin, they may open up a branch in Europe at some point. Oh, isn't that where they started? I think it was. We preface with US, New York City, -AA, -main line, and then the domain name. This could be an on Microsoft.com domain. I like to use the full vanity domain. That way I know that I'm not running into overlap, or somebody may have used this name before, or I run into a situation where the prefix has been done under one domain and then, and getting confused. So I like using the main vanity domain. If there is a phone number associated with the resource account, in this case there is. For my underlying call queues, those resource accounts won't have phone numbers, but in this case we do have a phone number. The display name, and you'll see the display name is kind of backwards from what my resource account name is. This is what's being displayed if a user gets a call from that auto attendant. So users typically won't get a call directly from the auto attendant because, like I said, I don't like to see users being directly attached to a key mapping. But if that was the case, this is what would show up. It doesn't make sense that a user starts seeing this part of it, because if you are an agent or if you're in the New York office and you see main line, you're going to automatically assume that it's the main line of the office that you're in, because that's what you're an agent of, right? Voice routing policy. In this case here, we're using direct routing. So if you ever want to transfer out from an auto attendant or a call queue to an external phone number, you need to assign a voice routing policy to that resource account. If you're using calling plans, you will have to buy a calling plan for that resource account to be able to transfer a number or transfer to an external number. So in the direct routing world, just by best practice, I always assign at least a national voice routing policy, even if I'm not using it, because chances are that 2 months from now, 3 months from now, somebody comes in and says, you know what, I need a key mapping that says 6 Domino's Pizza and transfer to Domino's Pizza, and they're doing that external number transfer and it's not working, and people are going like, well, why is it not working? Because somebody didn't put the voice routing policy in place for that resource account. So might as well just put it in right away whether you're using it or not. In this case, we do have an operator. So I am defining the resource account for the operator, which is, again, USNY, NYC01. So this time it's CQ for call queue, and then operator so that's what it's pointing to. We haven't built that yet, right? So this is where I'm designing from the top down, but when we get into building, I can't configure that until that call queue is actually built. That's the only way I can link into it. We have a time zone. We're Eastern here. We have a language. Enable voice inputs. That means, can I say accounting? Can I say human resources? Or am I forced to use key presses? So it really depends. So if my departments are pretty simple, such as sales or accounting, then I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to allow you to say it or press the key. If you're getting into something like certain cities, for example, transportation, maintenance, and equipment, if that's a department, that's a long thing to have to say to get to that department. In those cases where my department names become very long or complex, I typically turn off the voice inputs and force people you do have to use a key press to get to that department, okay? Directory search, in this case, that means dial by name. Dial by name is awesome. The only thing that's a caveat with dial by name is when you have multiple people with the same name within the organization. Teams is really, really bad at figuring out which one you want to reach. Skype for Business did a lot better at it. Or that was Exchange Unified Messaging actually, where it would fall back then on a department or an office or a title. Teams doesn't have that second level of confirming it. So the way to kind of deal with that is your dial scopes, but I do like directory search. I frown upon extension dialing on auto attendants. Extensions just need to go away. Okay. The problem with extensions are that when it comes to an auto attendant perspective, the extension is actually managed in Azure AD and not part of Teams. So you got to make sure that your AD is populated right with the right extensions and stuff like that, and it really becomes a mess to maintain. So I typically just tell customers we can't do it, and then they may read up a little bit and come back and start combating me, and then we're going to have that long discussion about the birds and the bees and why we don't want to do this stuff, right? But typically it's like, nope, we can't do that. So that's my first response. Dial scope include and exclude. So this is where we can say, in this case here, I am allowing a dial scope says dial by name for any users in the US. So that includes my West Coast users as well as my East Coast users, but not my users out in Europe, for example. This dial scope could also be that we're just doing New York users, because I may have my own auto attendant in LA. It could also be that I have different divisions or subsidiaries within the main company, and you want to limit that scope to just that subsidiary or that division of the company. Dial scope exclude, well, I'm sure that when you call Microsoft, that you can't just say, I want to talk to Satya. You know, I'm sure that he's not part of the include scope in their auto attendant, right? So there may be some executives that do not want to be reachable through that auto attendant, and that's why you're using the dial scope exclude. And the exclude overrides the include, so even though the executive may be part of the US users, if they're part of the executives group, and those are either distribution lists or Microsoft 365 groups, or the really cool way to do it is to do dynamic groups in Azure AD. A dynamic group in Azure AD, you can start automatically adding, people are automatically added based on attributes in the AD, so you can do that based on an office or based on a title or based on a city or something like that. That way you don't have to manually maintain that distribution list or that Microsoft group. We have our business hours. We have a standard opening greeting. And again, I want to be as, I want to give as much information, but not making it too long for when people are calling in, okay? So you've reached the company. If you know the name of the person you wish to call, you can say it at any time. To reach an individual department, say sales or press 1, say accounting or press 2. And if you don't, you can now, lately you've been able to, we can now actually do key mappings on the pound and the star sign, but if you don't define anything for the star key, that's automatically repeat. So I might as well say in there, say repeat or press star, and when you do that, it will repeat this open menu greeting. So it's only this part it's repeating and not the main part, okay? Then I have my different key mappings. In this case, these transfers out to these call queues, and notice the operator is a call queue. Even if I only have just one operator, I still want to do it a call queue, okay? And there's reasons for that as well, because if the call queue is not being answered, I can then send that call to a shared voicemail, which multiple people can then monitor. Closed greeting, again, you've reached the office, our office is currently closed. Then I like to paint out what's the actual office hours. A lot of people don't even think that far, it's just saying the office is closed. Well, if I'm calling in and the office is closed, I would like to hear when it's open again, right? So I like to and here I actually should have said Eastern, which I didn't do. If you would like to leave a voicemail for the operator or department, so in this case here, I'm actually allowing people to make an action. I'm not just going to hang up on them, but I'm going to allow them to actually hit the different departments and then transfer out to voicemail. So these are Microsoft 365 groups that have been defined, or we will define, that are our shared voicemails, okay? So some organizations will say, I don't care, I don't want to have departmental voicemails, I want to just leave it in the general voicemail box. I still like to say, press 1 to leave a voicemail, even if it's a general one, because I want the user to actually go through that extra step. I don't want after hours to have it automatically transferred to a voicemail, because what happens is you're going to get a lot of voicemails with nothing in it, because people are just waiting and stuff times out and people go like, so I actually want people to push something to actually leave that voicemail. Holidays, again, we now have key mappings on holidays. We didn't used to. A year ago, the only thing you could do for holidays was to transfer out. And that's where we would typically just transfer out to a shared voicemail. Nowadays, we do have key mappings on our holidays, and you will see, here's my holiday schedules. And I'm actually running 2 holiday schedules, and we'll see that in the Teams Admin Center when we get there. And there's a reason why I run 2 schedules. The holiday schedules are really meant to do 1 schedule per holiday, but I've found that to be very, very cumbersome to configure and maintain that configuration when we're doing, oh, here's a New Year's holiday schedule. Here is Martin Luther King's holiday schedule. Here is, if you're doing a holiday schedule for each holiday, then your holiday greeting can include what holiday it is. I am, in this case, just saying we're currently closed for the holiday. Then again, I'm going to give you my standard opening hours, and if you like to leave a voicemail, do it, and then we will return the call after the holidays. Where up here is saying we will return the call the next business day, right? So a little bit of nuance on when are we going to return that call. Then I like this one, inclement weather. That's a holiday schedule I'm running because I've got customers saying like, there's wildfires in the area, or it's a snow day. The office is closed due to weather concerns. Well, I now have everything set up for it, so all I have to do to trigger that is, as an admin, I go in that holiday schedule, and I'll show you that, and just stick the date in for today's date. And now I don't have to mess around with all the messaging and stuff like that. It's already there. And I'm still giving you the same choices of transferring into voicemail. And in this case, we'll return the call as soon as possible. Because are we open tomorrow? I don't know. We may be, we may not be, right? So this is how I typically document stuff from the top down. And this is stuff I can take back to the business. I can send this document to a business manager, and they can easily read this, comment it out, and say, we want stuff changed, we don't like this, we want the wording changed, and I'm not sitting there in the Teams admin center with these guys. Then down in my tabs here is my call queue for the operator. Again, I have there's no line URI here. Again, I have my name, CQ operator, and then operator CQ USNY NYC01, because I want to be able to see the first part when the call comes in and that toast is popping. The first thing I want to see is this is the operator call queue, and I'm in New York, so of course it's the New York operator call queue because that's what I'm an agent of. But I do like to just show that, but if this gets truncated out here, that's fine. Right? It's much better than if I was showing this first, and then if that got truncated, that's no good, right? Greeting, please wait for the next available operator. I like to have this greeting in here because it confirms that I hit the right key. I hit 0 to get to the operator, and now it's saying, please wait for the next available operator. So I like to have that in there. Conference mode, if you're a pure Teams shop, always leave that on. If you still have agents that are on Skype for Business on premises that are part of this call queue, you have to turn it off. But conferencing mode was back in the Skype days, the response groups had a nasty tendency of not setting up the call fast enough, so you would get the call in, it would set up the signaling, but it would take a second or two to actually set up the audio, the media. So, somebody will pick up the phone and say hello, and nobody on the far end would hear it. And, it was like you had to train your receptionist or your agents in picking up, going 1001, 1002, hello. And that was annoying. So turning the conference mode on, you're actually conferencing in the agent is what's happening on the back end. You're not going to notice that, but it is actually a conference call that you're being conferenced in. Any modern contact center today that works with Teams, the same happens. The call comes into the contact center will then conference in the user, the agent on Teams, and that way the contact center can still be in charge of the call control for that call. So, but that's just how it goes. Presence-based routing, I don't like it. Presence-based routing means that if you're not green in your Teams, you're not going to get a call distributed to you. I am one of these guys that puts stuff on my calendar just to put stuff on my calendar to remind me about stuff. And that means a lot of times my calendar, my team status will show I'm busy, but I'm not on a call. You know, and my coworkers know just because I show busy doesn't mean that they can't reach out to me, because it's not very intrusive. You're getting an IM that you're busy. They'll notice that if I'm on a call, not to bother me. Also, I'm pretty good at if I do throw stuff on my calendar, then I'll show it as free time. But I've had issues with agents not getting calls because they throw stuff on their calendar. So it's about training users. Some people say we like it. It's great because if I do throw stuff on the calendar, I really don't want that call. So that really comes down to preference and how you're training your end users. Agents can opt out. Yes, no. Again, that's a preference thing. The problem with agents being able to opt out is, do they remember to opt back in again? Because they don't automatically opt in again after a set amount of time. Max calls in queue, max time in queue, these are our overflows. So what happens with calls when they start stacking up and we don't have time to deal with them? I typically send them to a shared voicemail. But I let people know that we're experiencing a higher than expected call volume. Please leave a voicemail after the tone and we will return your call as soon as possible. Again, being a little courteous, not just say transferring to voicemail, right? So, in this case here, we're doing a serial. Well, a business manager doesn't know what serial means. So, I put in parentheses, this is a ring down, okay? A business manager knows what a ring down means. He or she doesn't know what serial means. So, in this case, we are hitting the receptionist first. And if the receptionist is busy, well, accounting is never doing anything anyway. So we'll let accounting be part of it as well, right? Sales department, pretty much all the same, except here I'm doing a round robin on distributing the calls. I don't like longest idle. Longest idle in the Teams work has to also do with what your present status is, and it tends to just be completely screwy. So I stay away from longest idle. There are some issues with present space routing, longest idle, and how that all interacts. So again, I just tell my customers, stay away from longest idle and just go to round robin. The effect is pretty much the same, okay? Accounting, again, I only have one person in accounting in this case. Human resources, I'm actually doing an attendant. Again, a business manager doesn't know what an attendant routing is, so it's a parallel call, right? So we're ringing both people at the same time. So here is my voicemail box. So this is a Microsoft 365 group. The name of the group, the display name, is never really being seen by anybody. I do like to make the access type private. Nobody else than who we designate really should be looking at these voicemails. I typically hide it from the address list, from the global address list. There's no reason for people to look it up, because if they can look it up, they can also send it an email. And if they send it an email, that's just nuisance. Auto-subscribe members, true. That means that any voicemail that comes into that shared voicemail box is also distributed into the user's inbox. So there's pros and cons to that. Pros is that you don't have to monitor the group itself all the time. Cons is that, you know, it can junk up your inbox. So again, it comes down to training, how we're going to do that. Responding to these voicemails, there may be multiple people that are part of that group. So if you're reacting on a voicemail, you can do a reply all to that voicemail, and it emails back to the group and says, hey, I took care of it. I called that person back, so disregard this voicemail. It's already been taken care of, right? So it's not only are we getting the voicemail distributed, it's also kind of incident management or voicemail management that you can let the team know that you have actually acted on this voicemail. Owner of that list, Michael Scott as the branch manager. We're going to allow him to add people to the group. And Pam is the receptionist. She needs access to it, of course. Michael also have access to it. Same thing with sales. We have 2 people in sales, and so on and so forth. So again, we designed it from the top down. Now we can build it from the bottom up because I've got all the information, right? So what does that look like? So the first thing I do is I build my holiday schedules. So in the GUI and Teams Admin Center, and see, this is where we're missing. I can't define that this is New Year's Day. I can't define that what the names of these holidays are, because it is really the way it was meant to be is that it was a schedule for, you may just have one date on there, and that would be US New Year's. I don't put a year on it, because I'm going to keep reusing the same holiday schedule year after year after year, because once it's assigned to your auto attendant, if you're going to create new holiday schedules, then you have to go back into all your auto attendants and reassign a new holiday schedule. So I don't put the year on. What I do is I have an H1, half one, first half of the year. I have an H2, second half of the year. 2 reasons for that. Number 1 is in the Teams Admin Center, I only have 10 entries of dates that I can put in here. In PowerShell, I think you have 50. But if you're managing this through Teams Admin Center, at some point, I'm going to run out of dates. And if you're just running the very narrow holidays in the US, yes, you can squeeze them into 10 entries. If you go to Europe, forget about it, okay? If you observe some of the newer holidays that are around, you're going to run into problems as well with just having 10 entries. The other reason is that come January 1st, I'm not struggling that I have to get the holiday schedules updated because, it's going to happen right now because we rolled into a new year, and here I can go, well, we run into June. After that holiday in June, I've got 6 months to get this schedule here updated until it's in effect again, okay? So I've got my H1, I've got my H2. So see, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And what did I have back here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See, I'm already 1 day or 1 entry over. So I couldn't run it in one schedule anyway, okay? Here's my inclement weathers. So these are US holidays, so I would apply this to multiple auto attendants. I'd apply that to my LA and my New York auto attendant because that's all the company are all honoring the same holidays. My inclement weather, well, that's office specific. That's specific to that particular office. So my LA auto attendant will have this in here. I have to define a date. I typically, when I create it, I just find an arbitrary date in the past and add to the schedule. Just make sure that that date is not the same date that you have on a schedule. I ran into, said, when I was creating this, I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to use 1/1/2023 in my inclement weather. And when I assigned both holiday schedules to my auto attendant, it was barking and said, there's an overlap in the days. So just make sure that, and I could have just picked a day in 2022 or a day in 2020 or whatever. So just make sure that the one day that's on there is in the past and it doesn't overlap with any of these. So okay, we have wildfires in LA today. The office is closed. Fine. I just closed the LA office. Okay? Yes. There are some changes that just went into effect where you can assign a regular user some privileges to the auto attendant, but they can only manipulate greetings. They can't manipulate behavior, only greetings. So this does require an admin. However, you can be creative, and if it's something that needs to be done by somebody else, you can always create an Azure function that you can tie to a Power Automate application and make something where through Power Automate that you can grant a user access to doing stuff like that. And that's pretty much anything throughout Office 365 where you're saying there's all these functions. If you can do it in PowerShell, you can program your way out of making widgets that somebody who may not have those credentials or that access, you can give them access to do certain things. There are third parties out there, like Code Software, for example, that has made a shell where you can give general users access to manipulate call queues and auto attendants. So there are third-party products out there, but again, it comes down to how much training do you want to give them, and and again, if they're not trained well, they can start making more problems than good is. So, but for an admin, to go in and just, it's like you saw, it's 15 seconds and you've got it turned on because you've got all the messaging in place already, right? So I start with my holiday schedules. Then I go down and define my resource accounts. My resource accounts are here. The first thing I do is just create the account. Display name. Where are we? I like to do it under Lab 001. The type, whether it's an auto attendant or a call queue. Once the account is created, then I go in and I typically create all the accounts I need because I know all the accounts I need because they're in my freaking worksheet, right? Because we've already gone through the design. So I'm not sitting here doing one resource account at a time. And this is where I'm going like, well, I've got 10 different resource accounts to do. Well, I would typically just PowerShell that up because I have a worksheet where I've just put the information in, it generates the PowerShell for me, I copy and paste that into PowerShell, and my resource accounts are created. That same worksheet that generates my PowerShell can also assign my licenses because that's next. You got to come in here. You got to make sure that you get that Microsoft Teams phone resource account. It used to be called the virtual user. Now it's called the phone resource account. Okay. In PowerShell, it's still called the same. Thank God. These licenses are free. There is no cost. If I go in and look at my licenses here, you'll see I've got my F3 licenses for my users. Yes, you can use a phone, Teams phone system license with an F3. You don't have to be on an E1. These are free. This is a CSP tenant. So I had to go back to my CSP provider. In my case, I'm my own CSP provider, but I had to go back to my CSP provider to purchase these licenses. So, but that should just be an email to your CSP provider, and they're going to ask how many do you need. In this case here, I just grabbed 20 because you never know how many you need when you need them. So, could have been 50.
Do you make that a default at the beginning project to email the CSP provider like, yeah, I need 25 days?
Yeah, we kind of have an idea, Joseph, around how many we need overall, you know, and then we get a bunch of them. I don't think there's a limit on it anymore. There was in the beginning. I think it was, depending on how many phone system standard licenses you can have this many resource account licenses. I think they took that limitation away. So if, you know, I've got nine licenses here, I could probably order 100 with no problem.
Do you think Microsoft won't charge those?
I don't think so. I would have a really hard time thinking that they would, because any other platform out there are not charging for auto attendants and call queues. And remember, this is not contact center, it is a freaking auto attendant or call queue. It could be that we're getting into where Microsoft might start adding more contact center features on it, and they may have a premium resource account that gives you additional capabilities. That would be my guess. I have no idea. But for a general hunt group or a general auto attendant, they got to stay somewhat competitive out there. Once these are licensed up, and it can take, you know, 5, 10, 15 minutes before they're licensed up, I'm going to start, then I'm going to go in. I'm not going to start assigning phone numbers and stuff right now, because I license them and I try to assign a phone number or something like that. It's going to like, oh, you got to license this first. It takes a few minutes. It takes a Microsoft minute before the licenses actually take effect, right? But in the meantime, I can start building my stuff, because, and what do we start with? We actually start with building bottom up. So I go back and look at my groups. Man, I gotta put my glasses on now. Name, description, email address, aliases, all the standard stuff. Membership, owner, my call, members, sales here out on the West Coast, is, Dwight and Jim. Settings, send copies of Teams emails to the inboxes. So again, that's going to be a discussion you're having with the business, whether they want it or not, and then always private. And what I don't see here that, don't show team email in Outlook. Let's try to hide it as best as we can. Typically when I create these groups, I do it through PowerShell. Again, I've got some worksheets that where I just basically pop in the name of it, and I'll pop in the members in an Excel worksheet, and then that worksheet with concatenate generates the PowerShell for me. So, but like I said, we're not going to have time for that today. So we create, again, we might as well, when I created this, I just created all the groups at the same time. So I'm not creating one group, going back and creating my call queue, creating my, you know, because again, I have my documentation, so I know all the groups I need for that office, right? So here's my groups. Then we go back in here, and then the next thing I do is I'm going to create all my call queues. And here's my call queues, right? Assign calling ID. There's some new feature or newer features that I haven't really started working with, meaning that you can call out from a call queue and show the call queue's caller ID. Well, guess what? My call queue, yeah, I can assign the auto attendant's caller ID and stuff. You know, again, this is not a contact center, so really when you start getting into all of these things where, you know, the business wants this and that, and the problem is you give them a little finger, and before you know it, you know, it's so when they start saying we want these, you know, oh, I've heard you can do this, you know, you really have to sit down and have a frank conversation with them and say, are you sure you don't need a contact center? And you don't have to go full blown with something like Genesis or whatever. Landis makes something that's very affordable, and it's a single channel, just voice contact center, but gives you a lot of those features that are lacking in auto attendant and call queues, right? Greetings. Please wait for next available sales representative. You know, I hit 1 for sales. Now I'm getting that confirmation that I actually hit 1 because I can't in the auto attendant say transferring to sales before it does the transfer. You hit the button, it transfers. But at least here I can say, please wait for the next sales representative. And it gives you that confirmation that I actually ended up in the right queue. Okay? I didn't fat finger my dial. Play default music. You can also upload an audio file. An audio file doesn't necessarily just mean that it's music. You can have, you can do that audio file, and if you're a little bit creative, you can have announcements in that audio file, say, with whatever promotions you're running, Oh, by the way, remember we have 4 reams of paper for the price of 3 this month, right? And then you fade back into music again, things like that, right? So.
Will there be other music options coming?
I don't think so.
No?
I don't think so. Again, it's not a contact center, right?
Music's off.
Yeah, well, it's either you play the default music, which, by the way, is freaking terrible.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's awful.
It is because it's if you're listening to it, it's actually distorting on most of the devices you're listening to. I was listening to it going, man, this is really bad, But it's funny, I called one of my healthcare providers the other day, and I got Teams wait music. I'm like, they're running Teams. Call answering, you can use a team for it. I'm like, I've got enough team sprawl just with Teams itself. I don't need my call queue to be part of Microsoft Teams. Well, as part of a Teams channel, there may be reasons you want to do that. In most cases, no. The problem is if you're doing it in Teams channels, some organizations like to have 2 levels of call queues, so that, for example, the call overflow, instead of it going to a voicemail, they'll roll it to a secondary call queue that has a bigger number of agents. Okay, so let's say in this case here we have this is Los Angeles, LAX sales. If they're not answering, we could roll it to New York sales, for example. And if you start rolling it from call queue to call queue, doing those channels in Teams becomes very problematic because, well, where did this call actually end up, right? So I typically don't use any of that. And also using a group becomes a problem because I can't do a ring down if I'm using a group, because there's no order in a Microsoft 365 group. It's completely random, so that ring down I can't use. If I'm using round robin or I'm using parallel, yes, I could use a distribution group or a Microsoft 365 group. I like to just do it here because then I can also really look out here. If I'm using a group, you can see I wouldn't have any call agents. And it's nice to be able to glance here. And this is something that you actually have to check once in a while. Take a snapshot and say, how many call agents did we have when we started this? Because what happens is that there's turnover within the organization. And all of a sudden, there's 3 people who's left. And all of a sudden, you've got, you may have hired 3 new sales guys, but nobody added them to the freaking call queue. And now you've got a call queue sitting with 0 agents because during onboarding, somebody forgot something. So it's one of those things that periodically needs to be checked, that you've got the numbers in there that were intended, Whether that be a range of numbers or a fixed number, it could be, we should have between 4 and 6 agents within this call queue, right? We should not just have 1.
If you do it as a user, though, then you have to do it as IT.
You have to do it as IT.
Group where the owner can just
Yes, and again, it's stuff that can be automated if you are It's one of the things we at my organization are looking into automating for our customers, where when we build it, we have a baseline that goes into a database. Here's our baseline, and then we're going to automate that. Every week we run a script against it, and we automate that script, and it's going to spit out and says, hey, these call queues went below threshold. Go back to and then we're going to have, as part of that, also who's responsible in the business, not on the IT side, but who's responsible on the business side for that call queue, so that we can get additional people assigned. Because again, I don't know who that business manager wants to be part of that call queue. Sometimes it is, I'm working with a healthcare organization, and we have it down to a science that says, for these call queues, it's people with this job title that goes into this call queue. This call queue, it's people with that job title that goes into this call queue. So, okay. Questions on the call queues? I think we've got, so here's that authorized users. So Michael can make, the only thing he can do is, here's my voice application policies. Let's take a look at that. Let's cancel out of that. So you can see it's basically just greetings. You can change music on hold. You can change some stuff around shared voicemail. I'm not letting my business unit managers do this, and that, okay? I may allow them to mess with my greetings, but still, I got a hard time with, I'm a control freak. I don't fare well with letting go of control, because it's sometimes you just don't trust your end users. Okay. Now we go into the auto attendants themselves. New York. Again, everything that was on our Excel spreadsheet. We have the operators defined as a call queue. We've got our time zone, the standard call flow, and they've really messed up the Teams admin center. This box here used to be this big. This area here used to be this big. This stuff here used to be this big. Now I got to go back and forth, and it's just a pain. So I don't know what happened. And then again here I've got dial by name. I never ever want to hear about dial by extension. Forget about it. It doesn't exist. Just wipe it out.
A lot of people use it.
Call flow after hours, we said I don't know what happened here. That should have been none. Yeah, Teams admin center is just screwy sometimes. So again, I've got the same things here. So it's basically just the greeting message, and then instead of sending it to voicemail. So I'm turning transcription on for that voicemail, and I am skipping the internal voicemail system that says, please leave a message, because in my settings up here, I am actually telling them we will return the call on next business day. And actually, there should have been a greeting here, but whatever. You can leave that on, or you can leave it off. I like to turn transcriptions on anytime I can, because quite frankly, I never listen to any voicemails. If I get a voicemail, I can kind of skim the transcription. I called the person back instead. And the person, did you hear my voicemail? I said, nope, now you get to repeat yourself. That's what you get for leaving a voicemail. I don't have time for that nonsense, right? Coca-Cola got rid of their voicemail system, not because of what it cost them to maintain their voicemail system. It was a productivity killer. So they just got rid of it and said, we don't do voicemails. So. Again, here is my different holidays. And this is why I don't want to have an each individual holiday for each holiday, because I actually have to define each single one here, right? So yeah, let's add New Year's. Okay, let's add Martin Luther King Day, you know, and then I have to do all the stuff that needs to be done for each of those with the call flow and all of that stuff. So that's why I try to consolidate my holidays as much as possible, right? Here's my dial scope. Custom user group. Where's my group? Teams Admin Center is screwed up. This should be US users under here. There it is. And exclude is my executives, right? Okay. Here's my IT, internal IT. I don't have a greeting on it. I'm going to redirect the call straight to a call queue. The only reason I'm putting an auto attendant in front of that call queue for my internal IT is because I want to do some time of day routing. So after hours and during holidays, I'm actually routing out to another call queue that is called IT after hours call queue forward. That's actually an external phone number. I did do it and tie that external phone number to a call queue with no agents and a timeout that says 0. And then the call basically transfers out. The reason why I don't put the phone number directly in here and say external number is that I may have different auto attendance call queues that are transferring out to that same number. So if that number needs to change, I only have to change it on that forwarding call queue and not on each of the auto attendants or call queues that are referring to it. We are down to the wire here. Any questions? Any comments?
Question. Do you ever do anything to like visually represent the hierarchy of?
I don't, but there's a guy named Martin out of Europe that does visualization. He's got some really cool PowerShell stuff that does visualization of your call queues and auto attendants. And Michael Lamontagne out of Canada is doing a product called Teams Boss, which is an admin overlay to Teams that also does some visualization of auto attendants and call queues.
Who's the first person?
Martin Heuser, Heuser.
From an end user agent's call history, they couldn't differentiate between a call to themselves versus a call from the call queue.
Yeah, that can be, that's a little bit problematic. I don't think it's there. Again, reporting is a little scarce. There are some additional overlay Power BI reports that you can get from Microsoft specifically for call queues and auto attendants. And they're actually being updated quite frequently. So take a look at that. Again, this is not a contact center.
But like for HR, we have to return every single call if they didn't get a live body, and all these people are like, oh, did you get the call?
Well, if that's a requirement, then HR needs to spend the money on a formal contact center. Okay? If I need to go 4x4ing and I need to have a rugged vehicle, I'm not gonna buy a cheap Daihatsu to do that. Joseph?
I noticed that you didn't mention much about the speech function of the auto attendant. Are you seeing that being popular? Or?
I really like, most of my customers are very happy with the speech and not having to go back and do recordings. The only time I ever do recordings is if I am having a multilingual auto attendant, for example in Canada, where we start out with press 1 for English, press 2 for French, and I don't know how to say press 2 for French, but in that case, we would go with a recording and then Press 1 would take you to the English auto attendant, press 2 would take you to the French auto attendant, and then we would fall back on the speech again. And if you want the speech to sound the same, even if it's recorded, you can use Azure Cognitive Services to create that speech because it's the same engine. And then you create your English snippet, you create your French snippet, and then go into Audacity and put the two snippets together, and there's your audio clip. That's it. It's a wrap.